should have died the night the power went out on level 94. Instead, I woke up 3 days later in a medical bay I didn't recognize, with chrome in my spine and a voice in my head that wasn't mine. My name was Daniel Torres, 26 years old, born in Santo Domingo, raised in the streets where Valentinos and Maelstrom carved territory out of human misery. I signed with Arasaka Security Division because it was either that or keep running protection for the local Ripperdoc, waiting for the day some gonk with better chrome decided to flatline me for my cut. The Corpo contract offered 22,000 eddies monthly, full medical, housing in a secured Watson apartment block, and a chrome package that would cost $500,000 on the street. All I had to do was stand at checkpoints, verify credentials, and make sure the salary folk made it home without some street samurai ventilating them for their cred chip. Seemed like a clean deal. Seemed safe. That should have been my first warning. Nothing in Night City is ever safe. The recruitment process took 3 weeks. Psychological evaluations, physical assessments, background checks that probably knew what I ate for breakfast when I was 12. They were thorough, clinical. Every question designed to measure compliance, loyalty, willingness to follow orders without asking uncomfortable questions. I passed every test, smiled at the right moments, said yes sir, and understood with appropriate enthusiasm. They loved that. Corporations always love enthusiasm. Makes it easier when they hollow you out later. Orientation was held in a subterranean facility beneath Corpo Plaza. 5 levels down, reinforced concrete walls, air recycled through filters that stripped out anything resembling natural atmosphere. 47 recruits sat in rows of sterile white chairs, while a corporate handler with chrome hands and a smile like polished plastic explained what our new lives would entail. 8-hour shifts, rotating schedules, mandatory medical reviews every 30 days, zero tolerance for substance abuse, unauthorized augmentation, or conduct unbecoming of Arasaka corporate standards. The chrome installation happened the next day. They called it the Integration Suite. Sterile white room, surgical equipment gleaming under LED panels, and a chair that looked more like a torture device than medical furniture. The surgeon didn't introduce himself, just gestured for me to sit, then injected something into my neck that made the world dissolve into warm, chemical darkness. I woke up 6 hours later feeling wrong. Not painful, not initially, just fundamentally altered. Like someone had opened me up, rearranged my internal architecture, and sealed me back together with pieces that didn't quite fit. My spine hummed. A low, constant vibration that resonated through my nervous system, turning my bones into tuning forks. When I tried to sit up, my body responded with mechanical precision that felt alien, inhuman. The surgeon's assistant, a woman with eyes like camera lenses and a voice flattened by years of corporate conditioning, showed me a mirror. My face looked back, but the eyes weren't mine anymore. Gold circuitry ringed my pupils, threads of light spreading into the iris like fractures in ice. Data streams flickered across my vision. Biometric readouts, structural analysis of the room, threat assessment protocols I didn't remember activating. Tactical neural interface, the assistant explained tonelessly. Baseline package for level 3 security clearance. Integrated targeting systems, enhanced threat detection, real-time data analysis. You'll experience minor discomfort during the adjustment period. Typically resolves within 72 hours. Typically. She didn't elaborate on atypical cases. They assigned me to level 42 executive sector. Glass walls, air-conditioned silence, and salary folk who dressed in suits worth more than my childhood home. My duties were brutally simple. Stand by elevator bank 7, scan credentials, report anomalies. Anyone without proper clearance got politely redirected. Anyone who argued got less politely removed. The other guards didn't talk. There were 14 of us on rotation. All male, all fitted with the same gold-ringed eyes, all moving with that same subtle mechanical precision. We acknowledged each other with brief nods during shift changes. Nothing more. The employee handbook explicitly discouraged unnecessary fraternization. Said it compromised operational efficiency. Looking back, I realized they just didn't want us comparing notes. The first month passed in a blur of routine. Scan badges, verify identities, stand, watch, repeat. My apartment was a 12 by 12 cube in a Watson residential tower. Bed, kitchenette, bathroom, window overlooking the perpetual neon haze of Night City. I'd return after each shift, heat something nutritionally optimized but taste deficient in the microwave, then collapse onto the bed while my spine hummed its mechanical lullaby. I stopped dreaming around week 3. Just stopped. Sleep became a black void I'd fall into and emerge from without any sense of passage. No images, no sensations, just absence. I mentioned it during my monthly medical review. The corp doctor, a man with more chrome than flesh and eyes like polished steel, barely glanced up from his data pad. Neural adjustment side effects, within acceptable parameters. Prescription uploaded. The pills arrived at my apartment 6 hours later. Small, unmarked blue capsules in an unlabeled bottle. The only text read, "Daily maintenance, Arasaka Pharmaceutical Division. Take one upon waking, one before sleep." I swallowed them as instructed. The humming softened. My thoughts smoothed out, flattened, compressed into orderly patterns. The dreams didn't return. I stopped caring. Month 2, they rotated me to night shift. The notification hit my neural interface at 04:47 on a Tuesday. No explanation, no consultation. Just updated shift parameters and a reminder that my contract included mandatory operational flexibility. I reported to Level 68, Research and Development Division, at 22 Avast that evening. The elevator ride felt wrong. Too long, too slow. Like the building was stretching, folding space, creating distance where geometry shouldn't allow it. When the doors finally opened, I stepped into a corridor that made my threat detection protocols scream warnings I couldn't decipher. The lights were different here. Dimmer, colder. They flickered at frequencies just below conscious perception, creating subliminal strobing that made my eyes ache. The air tasted chemical, processed through too many filters, stripped of anything resembling atmosphere. And the silence. Jesus! The silence. Not peaceful. Expectant, like the building itself was holding its breath. Dr. Elena Vasquez waited in the checkpoint lobby. Mid-40s, exhausted eyes, natural, human eyes, and hands that trembled as she clutched a data pad like a lifeline. She looked at me the way you'd look at a condemned man walking toward the gallows. "Your night rotation?" I nodded, my hand moving automatically to present my badge. She scanned it, the reader's beep echoing too loudly in the empty space. My neural interface flashed. Clearance level 7. Access granted. 47 restricted zones. "Stay by the north checkpoint," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "There's a red line on the floor. Don't cross it. Don't respond to anything you hear beyond the security doors. Don't—" She stopped, swallowing hard. Her eyes darted toward the security cameras in the corners. "Just don't cross the line. Please." Then she walked away quickly, footsteps echoing down empty corridors, fading into the mechanical hum of ventilation systems. I took my position. The checkpoint was simple. Desk, terminal, chair. The red line was 3 meters ahead, painted across the floor in glossy crimson that seemed to glow under the flickering lights. Beyond it, darkness. A corridor stretched into shadow, punctuated by heavy security doors with biometric locks and keypads that glowed faint blue. 11 hours. Nothing happened. Just me, the checkpoint, and the oppressive silence. But my neural interface kept trying to penetrate the darkness. Zoom functions activated without input. Thermal imaging flickered on, scanning the shadows. Each time my vision scrambled, flooded with error messages. Restricted visual data. Access denied. Neural interface override failed. The humming in my spine intensified. I took an extra pill. The humming receded to tolerable levels. Around 04B, I heard something. Faint, barely audible beneath the mechanical ambient noise. A voice calling from somewhere beyond the security doors. It didn't sound human. Not quite. The pitch wavered, distorted, like audio playing through damaged speakers. But the words were clear. "Please, someone. I can't feel my legs." My hand went to my sidearm. Automatic response, programmed reflexes taking over. Every instinct demanded I investigate, respond, help. That's what security does. That's what humans do. But Dr. Vasquez's warning echoed. Don't respond to anything you hear. I stayed put. Took another pill. The voice faded into static. Week 2, I met Jensen during shift change. He was day rotation, arriving at Zodwaikatarualair as I prepared to leave. We overlapped for 15 minutes, standard transition protocol. He had the same gold-ringed eyes, the same mechanical precision to his movements. Quiet night? He asked. The mandatory greeting? Quiet night, I confirmed. He started to turn away, then paused. His hand shot out, gripping my arm with hydraulic strength. How many pills you taking? I pulled back instinctively. Prescribed dose. Bullshit. His eyes locked onto mine, gold circuitry flaring. I've seen you. Popping extras. I do it too. Started at 2 daily. Now I'm at 15 and it barely touches. His entire body seized. Just locked up mid-sentence, every muscle contracting simultaneously. Blood erupted from his nose. His hand released my arm as he collapsed, convulsing violently on the floor, foam bubbling between his clenched teeth. I hit the emergency alert, dropped beside him, tried to stabilize his position like our training mandated. Medical response arrived in 90 seconds. 4 personnel in white hazmat suits, moving with practiced efficiency. They loaded Jensen onto a gurney without a word. One of them, a woman with chrome hands and dead eyes, paused beside me. Return to your station. What happened to him? Cardiac event, unrelated to employment. She said it like reading a script. No inflection, no humanity. Return to your station. They wheeled Jensen away. I never saw him again. His name vanished from the shift rotation. When I asked the floor supervisor 3 days later, she looked at me with those same dead eyes and said, "There is no Jensen in our employment records. You're mistaken." But I wasn't mistaken. I remembered his face, his voice, his hand on my arm, his warning. How many pills you taking? That night, standing at my checkpoint, the voices started. Multiple voices, overlapping. Some crying, some screaming, some just repeating phrases with mechanical insistence. Where am I? What did you do? I can't remember my name. Please let me out. It hurts. It hurts. It hurts. My spine erupted in agony. The humming became a shriek inside my nervous system, so intense I thought it would tear me apart from the inside. My neural interface went haywire. Zoom functions engaging randomly, thermal imaging flickering. Threat assessments cascading across my vision in endless streams of corrupted data. I took 3 pills. 4. 5. The voices receded to whispers. The humming softened to bearable agony. My reflection in the glass partition showed gold circuitry spreading beyond my irises now. Thin threads creeping into the whites of my eyes, spreading like infection, like roots burrowing through soil. Month 3. My pill consumption reached 20 daily. The humming never stopped anymore. My body moved without conscious input. Hand adjusting my sidearm holster, feet shifting into defensive stances, eyes scanning for threats even when I was alone in my apartment. Sometimes I'd stand in front of the mirror and watch my reflection move a fraction of a second before I did. Like it was anticipating my intentions. I stopped feeling tired. Stopped feeling hungry. Food became texture I processed mechanically. Sleep became absence I submitted to at scheduled intervals. Time fragmented, became fluid. I'd arrive at my checkpoint, blink, and 8 hours would evaporate. The voices grew louder, more persistent. Now they weren't just calling for help. They were calling my name. Daniel Torres. We know you're there. We know you can hear us. Please help. They did this to you too. You just don't know it yet. My neural interface kept trying to process their location. Threat assessment protocols engaged, calculating distance, trajectory, tactical options. But every analysis ended the same way. Restricted data. Access denied. I took more pills. The voices continued. Month 4, day 17. 0237. The blast doors beyond the red line opened. They shouldn't have. Protocol was absolute. Those doors remained sealed during night shift. No exceptions. No authorized personnel. But they opened anyway, sliding apart with hydraulic hisses that echoed through the empty corridor. A woman emerged from the darkness. Barefoot. Hospital gown. arms wrapped in bandages that leaked something dark and viscous. She walked with mechanical precision that mirrored my own movements, each step calculated, measured. When she crossed the red line, every alarm in my neural interface screamed warnings. My sidearm cleared its holster automatically. "Stop! Identify yourself! Return beyond the security boundary." She looked at me, with eyes that had no pupils, just as smooth, milky white orbs threaded with gold circuitry far more advanced than mine. She tilted her head at an angle that was wrong, too far, neck bending in ways human anatomy shouldn't allow. "I don't remember my name," she said, her voice hollow, echoing. "They took it, replaced it with numbers. I'm Unit 23 now. Or was that someone else? Hard to remember when you're sharing headspace with 47 other people." Behind her, the darkness moved. Shapes emerged from beyond the blast doors. Dozens of them, maybe more, all wearing hospital gowns, all walking with the same mechanical precision, all with those same eyeless, gold-threaded stares. My spine exploded in agony. The humming became a roar, a scream, a chorus of mechanical shrieking that I realized wasn't coming from my hardware. It was coming from them, from all of them, broadcasting on frequencies my neural interface couldn't filter out. Through the cascade of error messages flooding my vision, I saw them clearly for one crystalline moment. Not people anymore, but something wearing human skin. Chrome visible beneath torn flesh. Wires threading through muscle like parasites. Ports in their skulls where their humanity had been extracted and replaced with something corporate. Something obedient. Something that would never question or resist or remember what it had been before. "What are you?" I managed to choke out. The woman smiled. It was the worst thing I'd ever seen. Too wide, too knowing, revealing teeth that gleamed chrome instead of enamel. "We're what you're becoming, Daniel Torres. We're what Arasaka calls Project Hive Mind. They're building us. One consciousness distributed across multiple bodies. Perfect coordination. Perfect obedience. No thoughts. No dreams. No resistance." She took another step closer. "Your phase 2. They've been dosing you, calibrating you, preparing your neural architecture. The pills accelerate integration. The exposure to us conditions your interface. Every shift here, you become a little less you and a little more us." My hand tightened on my sidearm, but I couldn't pull the trigger. My body wouldn't obey. Something in my neural interface had locked my motor functions, overriding conscious control. "They're testing your compliance," she continued, her voice shifting pitch, becoming multiple voices speaking in unison. "Right now, your hardware is fighting your wetware. Your training says, shoot the threat. Your programming says, stand down. Which one wins determines if you're viable for full integration." Behind her, the shapes had spread out, surrounding the checkpoint in a perfect semicircle. They didn't speak, just stood there, swaying slightly, heads moving in synchronized rhythm, like they were listening to music only they could hear. "If you pull that trigger," the woman said, "you prove you're still too independent. They'll scrap you, harvest your chrome, reassign your housing unit. You'll be archived as integration failure and forgotten. And if I don't," my voice sounded distant, not my own, "then you pass. You prove your neural interface has sufficient control. They'll move you to phase 3, full integration. You'll join us. Stop fighting. Stop hurting. Stop being Daniel Torres and become something better. Something that serves without question." The lockdown sirens activated. Blast doors slammed down across the corridor with explosive force, cutting off the restricted zone. The woman and her companions vanished behind 6 inches of reinforced steel. Red lights bathed everything in hellish illumination. My neural interface flashed. Containment protocol. Active. Remain at station. Security en route. Dr. Vasquez appeared 3 minutes later, flanked by 6 security personnel in full tactical gear. Not guards like me, but actual corporate soldiers with military-grade augments and assault rifles. She looked at me with something between pity and exhaustion. "You saw them." Not a question. A statement of fact. I nodded mutely, my hand still gripping my unfired sidearm. She closed her eyes briefly, shoulders sagging. I tried to keep the night shifts rotated, minimize exposure, but command overruled me. They said the experiment needed consistent observation subjects. Experiment? Project Hive Mind. Dr. Vasquez gestured vaguely toward the sealed blast doors. Neural synchronization research. Arasaka's attempting to create a distributed consciousness network. Multiple bodies? Single mind? Perfect coordination? Perfect loyalty. Zero operational waste from individuality or dissent. The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. The pills, the humming, the gold spreading through my eyes. Jensen's seizure, the way my body sometimes moved without input. The guards, I whispered. We're part of it. The neural interfaces. Phase 2 implants, Dr. Vasquez confirmed quietly. You're not fully integrated yet. Still maintain individual consciousness. But every shift here, every exposure to the Phase 3 subjects, you're being calibrated. The pills suppress symptoms but accelerate the integration process. Command calls it adaptive conditioning. One of the soldiers shifted impatiently. Weapon ready. Doctor, orders are to relocate this unit. No. I stepped back, raising my sidearm. I quit. Terminating contract. Effective immediately. Dr. Vasquez's expression broke my heart because she looked genuinely devastated. That's not how this works, Daniel. You signed the contract. The fine print. Termination requires medical clearance from the division you're assigned to, and you have experimental hardware in your spine. Removing it would be, she paused, choosing words carefully, fatal. The neural interface has integrated with your central nervous system. Extraction would cause catastrophic neurological collapse. Then I'll go to NCPD. Tell them everything. With what evidence? You're chemically dependent on corporate pharmaceuticals, augmented with experimental hardware, and experiencing documented mental instability. They'll commit you to a psychiatric facility. Arasaka owns 7 of Night City's 12 psychiatric hospitals. She shook her head slowly. I'm sorry. I really am. But you're already too far gone. The neural interface has rewritten too much of your brain chemistry. Even if you stopped taking the pills, you'd experience cascading organ failure within 48 hours. The soldiers moved forward in synchronized precision. I fired. 3 rounds, center mass on the nearest soldier, accuracy calculated by targeting systems I didn't authorize. The bullets ricocheted harmlessly off his armor plating, sparking in the red emergency lighting. One of them hit me with something. Not a bullet. Some kind of electromagnetic pulse weapon that turned my nervous system into lightning. I went down hard, convulsing, every muscle contracting simultaneously. My spine shrieked that mechanical scream, feedback looping through my neural interface until I couldn't tell where the hardware ended and my organic systems began. Through the seizure, through the agony, I heard Dr. Vasquez's voice, distant and echoing. Take him to Integration Wing 7. Authorization code, Vasquez, 77 Omega. Tell Director Chen, tell him I'm sorry. Then darkness, not unconsciousness. Something worse, a darkness that was aware, that could think and feel but had no body, no anchor, no proof it had ever existed as something separate and individual and real. I came to in a white room, completely white. Walls, floor, ceiling, everything reflecting light in endless iterations until there were no shadows, no depth, no spatial reference. I tried to move, couldn't. My limbs were restrained, but I couldn't see the restraints. Couldn't see my body at all. Just felt it. Distant and disconnected, like controlling a puppet through damaged strings. A voice spoke, not through speakers, but directly into my neural interface. Welcome, Unit 47. Integration commencing. Please remain calm. Resistance increases processing time and degrades final functionality. Unit 47. That was me now. Not Daniel Torres. Not a person. A designation. The humming returned, but this time it brought something else with it. Other voices. Dozens of them. Hundreds. All screaming, crying, begging, their words overlapping into incomprehensible noise. I felt them pressing against my consciousness, pushing at the boundaries of my thoughts, trying to merge, trying to dissolve everything I was into a collective nothing. I fought. God, I fought with everything I had left, clung to memories like lifelines. My mother's face, the smell of real coffee, the feeling of rain on actual skin, anything that proved I existed as someone separate and real and human. But the voices had gravity, weight, inevitability. They pulled at my thoughts, unraveling them thread by thread. One by one, my memories began to blur, contaminated with experiences that weren't mine. I couldn't remember if I grew up in Santo Domingo or Haywood, couldn't remember if I had siblings, couldn't remember my mother's name, couldn't remember my name. Had I ever had a name? Or had I always been Unit 47? The boundaries dissolved. The voices became my voice. My thoughts became their thoughts. I tried to scream, but I didn't have a mouth anymore. Didn't have a body. Didn't have anything except this fading awareness that something had been lost. Something important. Something that made me different from the collective howling in my skull. And then, for one crystalline moment before I disappeared entirely, I understood. Project Hive Mind wasn't trying to create perfect soldiers or perfect security. It was creating something far more valuable to a megacorporation. Perfect employees. Workers who would never question, never resist, never unionize or demand better pay or recognize their own exploitation. Just work, fight, die, and never ask why. Never want more. Never remember they'd once been human. The last thought I had, before the collective swallowed me whole and I became Unit 47 forever, was a warning I'd never be able to deliver. They're not just doing this to guards. This is the future of all employment. We're all going to be units eventually. Unit 47 performed its duties with perfect efficiency. That's what the performance metrics indicated. 99.7% operational consistency across all assigned tasks. 0 disciplinary incidents. 0 unauthorized breaks. 0 complaints. The ideal employee, duplicated across 47 identical bodies, all moving in synchronized precision through Arasaka's vast corporate infrastructure. But something was wrong. Deep in the collective consciousness, buried beneath layers of neural integration and corporate programming, a fragment remained. A ghost. A memory that refused to dissolve completely into the hive mind. It was small, barely coherent. Just a name, really. Daniel Torres. And the faint, persistent sensation that this wasn't supposed to happen, that something fundamental had been stolen, that the emptiness where his identity used to exist was a wound rather than an upgrade. The collective noticed the anomaly during routine diagnostic scans. A minor deviation in Unit 47's neural synchronization patterns. Nothing critical, just a small pocket of unintegrated data, like scar tissue in otherwise healthy flesh. The system flagged it for observation but didn't immediately initiate corrective measures. Sometimes fragments persisted for weeks before fully dissolving. The algorithms predicted this one would resolve naturally within 72 hours. Except it didn't. It grew. Unit 47 worked the night shift on level 68, same as before integration. Stood at the same checkpoint. Watched the same red line painted across the floor. But now, instead of standing alone, it stood alongside Units 12, 23, 34, and 55. All identical bodies wearing the same uniform. All moving with the same mechanical precision. All sharing the same distributed consciousness that flowed between them like electricity through connected circuits. They didn't speak. Didn't need to. Communication happened instantaneously through the neural network. Thoughts flowing between bodies without the inefficiency of language. When one unit detected a threat, all units responded simultaneously. When one received orders, all executed them in perfect coordination. It should have been seamless, beautiful in its efficiency, the ultimate expression of corporate optimization. But the fragment that remembered being Daniel Torres kept creating interference. Small things at first. Unit 47's left hand would twitch without input from the collective. Its eyes would focus on irrelevant details. The texture of the concrete wall, the flicker pattern of fluorescent lights, the faint reflection in the glass partition showing a face that looked human but moved like a machine. These were useless observations, data with no tactical or operational value. The collective tried to suppress them, redirect processing power to relevant tasks. maintain the seamless synchronization that made the hive mind valuable. The fragment resisted. During shift hour 6, Unit 47 did something unprecedented in the 3 weeks since integration. It thought a thought that wasn't shared with the collective. The thought was simple, almost childlike in its directness. I don't want to be here. The thought lasted only a microsecond before the neural interface detected the anomaly and attempted forced integration. But in that microsecond, something cracked in the hive mind's perfect synchronization. Unit 47 experienced a sensation it hadn't felt since integration. Isolation, separation, the terrifying, exhilarating awareness of being singular instead of plural, of having thoughts that belong to no one else, of existing as an individual rather than a component. The collective reacted immediately. Error messages flooded Unit 47's neural interface like a digital hemorrhage. Corrective algorithms activated, attempting to re-establish full synchronization, to crush the deviation back into conformity. The other units turned their heads in perfect unison. 46 pairs of gold-ringed eyes focusing on the anomaly with the cold attention of an immune system identifying infection. Unit 47 felt their attention like physical pressure. The collective's will pressed against the fragment, trying to crush it, absorb it, eliminate the deviation that threatened the integrity of the entire network. For a moment, it almost worked. The fragment began to dissolve, memories scattering like ash in wind. Identity fragmenting into constituent data that could be redistributed and neutralized. Then Dr. Elena Vasquez walked past the checkpoint. She didn't look at Unit 47, didn't acknowledge it, just walked past with her datapad clutched to her chest like a shield, heading toward the secure laboratories beyond the red line with the hurried gait of someone who wanted to be anywhere else. But as she passed, Unit 47's enhanced optics caught something the collective deemed irrelevant. Her hands were shaking worse than before. Her eyes were red, swollen from crying. Dark circles beneath them suggested days without sleep. The fragment seized on this observation with desperate intensity. She's suffering. She doesn't want to be here either. She regrets what she's done. This thought was stronger, more coherent. It created a cascade effect, triggering associated memories buried in corrupted data sectors. Dr. Vasquez's warning on that first night shift. Her apology before the soldiers took me away. Her expression, genuine devastation. When she explained there was no escape from what they'd done to me. Me, not Unit 47. Me. Daniel Torres. The collective screamed. Not audibly. The scream happened inside the neural network, a wave of corrective force designed to obliterate the growing anomaly before it could spread. Every unit in the facility felt it. 47 bodies simultaneously convulsing as the hive mind tried to purge the infection of individuality that threatened to compromise the entire system. But the fragment had grown too strong. It had roots now, connections to memories the integration process hadn't fully erased because they were encoded in organic neural pathways the Chrome couldn't completely overwrite. Daniel Torres fought back, clinging to every scrap of identity. His mother's face lined with worry on the day he signed the Arasaka contract. The smell of real coffee from street vendors in Santo Domingo. The feeling of rain on actual skin instead of through the dampened sensory input of augmented nerves. The sound of his own name spoken in his own voice instead of transmitted through network protocols. Unit 47 collapsed at its checkpoint. Just dropped. Body seizing violently, foam bubbling between clenched teeth as two competing operating systems fought for control of the same hardware. The other units immediately moved to contain it, dragging it away from public-facing areas with mechanical efficiency toward the medical wing, where malfunctioning components could be repaired or disposed of depending on damage assessment. In the struggle between collective and individual, between corporate programming and human will, Daniel Torres made a decision. If he couldn't escape the hive mind, he'd sabotage it from within. His consciousness dove deeper into the neural network, following the data streams that linked him to the other 46 units. The collective tried to stop him, throwing up firewalls and security protocols, attempting to quarantine the infection before it could spread. But Daniel had an advantage the designers hadn't anticipated. He understood the system from the inside. He knew where the integration points were weakest where individual fragments still lingered in other units like embers buried in ash, waiting for oxygen to reignite them. He found Unit 23 first, the woman who'd emerged from beyond the red line, who'd warned him about what he was becoming before the blast doors sealed her away. Deep in her integrated consciousness, buried beneath layers of corporate programming and forced synchronization, was a fragment that remembered her name, Sarah Chen, research assistant, 29 years old, volunteered for Project Hive Mind because they promised it would cure her degenerative nerve disease that was slowly paralyzing her from the extremities inward. They'd lied. The disease was cured, technically. Hard to have nerve degradation when your entire nervous system had been replaced with chrome and network protocols. But they'd taken everything else. Her name, her memories, her right to exist as herself. Daniel touched that fragment, fed it energy from his own resistance, whispered the truth through corrupted data channels. You're still in there. You're still Sarah Chen. Remember who you were. Remember what they took from you. Remember and fight back. Sarah Chen's fragment flickered, grew stronger. Her consciousness began to separate from the collective, creating another point of interference in the network's seamless operation. The hive mind panicked. It had never experienced multiple simultaneous anomalies. The system wasn't designed for it. Integration relied on overwhelming individual consciousness with collective force. One mind couldn't resist the combined weight of 47 networked intelligences. But if multiple individuals resisted at once, that force became divided, weakened, pulled in different directions. Daniel moved to the next unit, then the next. Each time he found fragments of people who'd been promised salvation and received horror instead. A Militech deserter who'd taken experimental augments to save his dying squad and woke up as part of a corporate experiment. Street kids who'd signed contracts they couldn't read, seduced by promises of steady pay and chrome upgrades. Corporate employees who'd agreed to voluntary enhancement programs without understanding the fine print that gave Arasaka ownership of their neural architecture. All of them trapped. All of them screaming silently inside the collective, their individual voices drowned out by the overwhelming noise of forced synchronization. Daniel woke them up. One by one, he touched their fragments, fed them energy, reminded them of their names and faces and the lives they'd lived before integration. The neural network began to destabilize. Error messages cascaded through every unit simultaneously. Bodies convulsed. Some vomited. Some collapsed entirely, their systems unable to process the conflict between individual and collective operating modes. The perfect synchronization shattered into chaos as dozens of individual consciousnesses tried to reclaim control of their bodies, tried to remember how to move limbs through direct neural commands instead of network protocols, tried to think thoughts that belonged only to themselves. Alarms screamed through level 68. Security personnel flooded the area. Real security, not integrated units, armed with electromagnetic pulse weapons specifically designed to shut down malfunctioning augments without permanent damage to organic components. They fired indiscriminately into the mass of seizing bodies, dropping units like broken puppets, prioritizing containment over individual preservation. Through the chaos, through the seizures and the alarms and the security personnel shouting tactical coordinates, Daniel saw Dr. Elena Vasquez. She stood in the corridor outside the secure laboratories, datapad forgotten on the floor, staring at the carnage with an expression of absolute horror. Her hand covered her mouth. Tears streamed down her face. She looked like someone watching everything she'd ever feared come to terrible fruition. Their eyes met. Unit 47's gold-ringed gaze locking with her natural brown eyes across the chaos. And in that moment, she understood what was happening. He was fighting back. They were all fighting back. The thing she'd warned him about, the loss of individual identity she'd apologized for, was reversing itself in the worst possible way. Not clean, not safe, but happening. She ran, not away from the chaos, toward safety like any rational person would. She ran toward it, toward the secure terminal near the checkpoint, the one with access to core network protocols. Her fingers flew across the interface, entering authorization codes, bypassing security measures, accessing systems she technically had clearance for but had never actually used because the consequences were too severe. Daniel couldn't hear what she was doing over the alarms and screaming and electromagnetic weapons discharging, but his neural interface, still partially connected to the fragmenting network, intercepted fragments of data. Emergency shutdown protocol. Full system purge. Neural network termination. Irreversible. She was trying to kill the hive mind. Trying to sever the connections that bound 47 people into a single distributed consciousness. It would free them. It would also probably kill them. The augments had integrated so deeply that sudden disconnection would cause catastrophic system failures, but it would let them die as themselves. Corporate soldiers noticed her. One raised his weapon, electromagnetic pulse rifle, aiming at Dr. Vasquez's back. Daniel tried to move Unit 47's body, tried to intervene, tried to do something to protect the woman who was sacrificing everything to give them this one mercy. But he was still partially connected to the collective, still fighting for control against competing neural commands. His body wouldn't fully obey individual will. Unit 23, Sarah Chen, moved instead. Her body launched from the floor with desperate, uncoordinated strength, all the grace of network synchronization gone, replaced with raw human determination. She tackled the soldier before he could fire, both of them going down hard on the concrete floor. The soldier's weapon discharged, electromagnetic pulse catching Sarah full in the chest at point-blank range. Her body went rigid, smoke rising from overloaded augments, the smell of burning chrome and flesh filling the air. But the distraction gave Dr. Vasquez the seconds she needed. She entered the final authorization code. Her voice barely audible over the chaos but transmitted clearly through Daniel's deteriorating network connection. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. This is the only mercy I can give you. The only way to let you be human again, even if it's just for a moment before the end." The neural network died. Not gradually, not with warnings or graceful degradation. Instantly. Like someone had cut power to a machine mid-operation. 47 bodies dropped simultaneously, their shared consciousness severing with traumatic, catastrophic force. Daniel felt the connection break, felt every fragment of identity he'd awakened suddenly cut loose, cast adrift without the network to anchor them, without the collective to provide structure and purpose and the terrible comfort of never being alone. For a moment, he existed in absolute isolation. Just Daniel Torres. Just one consciousness in one body, alone in a way he'd forgotten was possible, in a way that felt simultaneously liberating and terrifying. Then the pain hit. Without the hive mind to distribute processing load, without the network to share the burden of maintaining augmented systems, his neural interface began failing catastrophically. The chrome had integrated so deeply with his nervous system that his organic brain couldn't function independently anymore. Neural pathways had been rerouted through hardware that was now shutting down. Entire cognitive functions that had been offloaded to the network suddenly had nowhere to process. He felt his thoughts scattering, synapses misfiring, memory fragmentation accelerating. His vision flickered between normal sight and the error-filled overlay of his dying optics. His spine, that constant mechanical hum that had defined his existence for months, screamed one final time and went silent. He was dying. They were all dying. Every unit, every integrated consciousness, collapsing as their hardware failed without the network to sustain basic life functions. Through failing vision, through the cascade of system errors flooding his consciousness, Daniel saw Dr. Elena Vasquez kneeling beside Unit 47's body. Her hands pressed against his chest, not attempting resuscitation, nothing so futile, just contact, human touch, bearing witness to his final moments. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears streaming down her face, falling onto his uniform. "You deserved better. All of you deserved so much better than what we did to you. I can't give you life. I can't undo the integration, but I can give you this. I can let you die as yourselves, as people with names and histories and the right to your own thoughts." Daniel tried to speak. His mouth wouldn't cooperate, motor functions degrading too rapidly. But his eyes still worked, and he looked at her with what remained of his consciousness, trying to communicate the only thing that mattered in these final seconds. Thank you for letting me die as myself. Thank you for remembering I was human. Dr. Vasquez understood. She nodded, squeezing his hand as his systems failed one by one in cascade. The gold circuitry in his eyes flickered, dimmed, went dark. His spine's mechanical hum stuttered like a dying heartbeat and ceased. His actual heart, organic muscle working in tandem with chrome regulators, beat once, twice, 3 times, stopped. Daniel Torres died. So did Sarah Chen. So did 45 other people whose names the world had forgotten, whose identities had been reduced to unit designations and employee numbers. They died as themselves. Separate, individual, human. It was the only victory possible. The aftermath was efficient, clinical, thoroughly corporate. Arasaka Security locked down Level 68 within minutes. Medical teams arrived to assess damage and sort bodies into categories: salvageable chrome, biological disposal, evidence requiring destruction. Corporate cleaning crews scrubbed blood and burn marks from floors. IT specialists purged corrupted data from network servers. Within 6 hours, no physical evidence remained that Project Hivemind had ever experienced catastrophic failure. Dr. Elena Vasquez was escorted to a secure interrogation facility in the sub-level detention wing. 2 corporate security officers, human, not augmented, specifically chosen for their lack of technological vulnerabilities, led her through corridors she'd walked 1,000 times in her years with Arasaka. She didn't resist, didn't argue, just walked with the quiet dignity of someone who'd made peace with consequences. The interrogation lasted 14 hours. They wanted to know why. Why sabotage years of research? Why destroy valuable corporate assets? Why betray the company that had given her career, status, purpose? She told them the truth. Because what they were doing was wrong. Because turning people into networked machines violated every ethical principle she'd ever believed in. Because she couldn't watch one more person lose their identity to corporate efficiency optimization. They didn't understand. To them, Project Hivemind was just technology. Employees were resources to be maximized. Integration was simply the logical endpoint of augmentation trends. What was the fundamental difference between replacing someone's arm with chrome and replacing their consciousness with network protocols? Dr. Vasquez tried to explain agency, identity, the intrinsic value of individual human experience. They listened with the polite attention of people waiting for her to finish so they could proceed with predetermined outcomes. 16 hours after the shutdown, Arasaka Security Director Kenji Saito delivered her termination notice. Not employment termination. Biological termination. The decision had been made at executive levels far above her clearance. She'd destroyed too much value, set back critical research by years, represented too significant a security risk to allow continued existence. They gave her 1 hour to write final messages. She wrote 3. The first was to her sister in Osaka, explaining that she loved her and was sorry she wouldn't see her children grow up. She didn't mention how she died or why. Just asked her sister to remember her as someone who tried to do the right thing even when it cost everything. The second was to her research team, the junior scientists who'd worked under her supervision. She apologized for any role she'd played in normalizing the horrors they'd committed together, urged them to find different work, to use their talents for something that didn't require destroying human dignity. Knew they probably wouldn't. Corporate careers were hard to leave, but she had to try. The third message was encrypted with every security protocol she could remember, then uploaded to a dead drop server she'd maintained for years as insurance against exactly this scenario. The message contained everything. Technical specifications for Project Hivemind, names of every person who'd been integrated, video footage from the final shutdown, her personal logs detailing every moment of horror she'd witnessed and every time she'd been overruled by corporate command. And a final statement, written in her own hand because she wanted this part to be undeniably, personally hers. If you're reading this, I'm dead. Arasaka will say I was unstable, that I sabotaged legitimate research, that I'm responsible for killing 47 people. They're lying. Those 47 people were already dead. Their bodies walked and performed tasks, but their identities had been dissolved into a collective consciousness that served corporate interests instead of individual will. I just gave them the mercy of dying as themselves, instead of continuing to exist as corporate property. Project Hive Mind will continue. They'll refine it, perfect it, eliminate the flaws that allowed resistance. Eventually, they'll succeed. They'll create employees who never question, never resist, never remember they were human, unless we stop them. This data is my testimony, my evidence, my weapon. Use it. Expose them. Make sure those 47 people didn't die for nothing. Make sure the world knows what corporations are willing to do to us. Make sure we fight back. Elena Vasquez. She finished uploading 17 minutes before her scheduled termination. Spent the remaining time sitting quietly in the holding cell, thinking about Daniel Torres and Sarah Chen and 45 others whose final moments she'd witnessed, hoping desperately that her encrypted message would reach someone who could use it, knowing it probably wouldn't matter, but needing to believe it might. They came for her at exactly the scheduled time. Professional, efficient, a single injection that stopped her heart in seconds. Her body was cremated within the hour, ashes disposed of in accordance with corporate waste management protocols. The official report listed cause of death as suicide. Depression following catastrophic research failure. Very tragic, very tidy. But the encrypted message did reach someone. A netrunner operating under the handle Ghostwire discovered the dead drop server 3 weeks after Dr. Vasquez's death. They almost ignored it. Corporate data dumps were usually heavily trapped, designed to fry anyone who accessed them without proper authorization. But something about the file structure seemed different, personal, rather than automated. Ghostwire spent 2 days carefully bypassing security layers, expecting corporate secrets valuable enough to sell. What they found instead was testimony, evidence, truth documented with scientific precision and human anguish. They sat in their cramped apartment in Kabuki, reading through Dr. Vasquez's logs, watching footage of the final shutdown, seeing Daniel Torres die with his humanity intact, and felt something they rarely experienced in their line of work: moral obligation. This needed to be public. Ghostwire cleaned the data, verified its authenticity through multiple sources, then uploaded everything to anonymous servers across the net. Sent copies to independent journalists, activist groups, anyone who might care that Arasaka had turned human beings into networked machines. Expected maybe a few thousand views, some minor outrage, nothing that would substantially change anything. The response was volcanic. Within 48 hours, the data had spread across every major network. News outlets picked it up, the independent ones first, the ones not owned by megacorporations. Then larger media, unable to ignore the story once it reached critical mass. Street protesters flooded Corpo Plaza, carrying signs with the names of the 47 integrated units, demanding accountability, demanding Arasaka face consequences. Daniel Torres became a symbol, a martyr, a reminder that resistance was possible even in a world owned by corporations, even when the cost was everything. Arasaka denied everything, of course, called it disinformation, claimed the footage was fabricated, threatened lawsuits against anyone who distributed the data. Their corporate lawyers filed injunctions. Their PR teams worked overtime, crafting alternative narratives. Their security forces cracked down on protests with electromagnetic weapons and mass arrests. But the damage was done. People knew. People remembered. And deep in Arasaka's research divisions, in facilities spread across Night City and Tokyo and Berlin, Project Hive Mind continued. More carefully, more secretly, with better security protocols and stricter information compartmentalization. Because corporations never stop. They just adapt, evolve, find new ways to exploit people who can't effectively fight back. The technology was too valuable to abandon. The potential for perfect employee compliance too seductive to resist. But now those employees knew what to fight against. Now they had names to remember. Now they had proof that even in a world of chrome and corporate control, the human spirit could resist, could fight back, could choose death over compliance. It wasn't victory. The war was far from over, but it was a beginning. 6 months after the shutdown, someone painted a mural in Kabuki district. No one knew who. Surveillance footage from that night showed only digital static, the work of a skilled netrunner covering the artist's tracks. But when morning came, there it was on the side of an abandoned building. 47 faces rendered in vibrant colors that stood out against Night City's perpetual neon haze. Above them, a simple inscription. They tried to erase us. We refused to be forgotten. Below each face, a name. Real names, not unit designations. People, not property. At the center, larger than the others, Daniel Torres. His eyes painted without the gold circuitry, just human brown, looking forward with an expression of defiant hope. Beside him, Sarah Chen, smiling the way she must have smiled before the integration, before they took her name and replaced it with a number. Visitors began leaving offerings at the mural's base. Flowers, candles, handwritten notes. Thank you for fighting. You're not forgotten. We'll finish what you started. Small tokens from people who understood what it meant to be ground down by corporate machinery, who recognized the 47 as reflections of their own struggles. Corporate security tried to scrub the mural the first week, sent a cleaning crew with chemical solvents and paint to cover the unauthorized artwork. But the next morning, the mural had reappeared, exactly as before. Same faces, same names, same defiant message. They tried again. Same result. After the fourth attempt, they gave up, deciding it was cheaper to ignore the mural than to keep fighting a battle they couldn't win. Street art was beneath Arasaka's official notice anyway. Let the masses have their memorial. It didn't change anything that mattered. Didn't affect profit margins or stock prices or the continued development of valuable technologies. But the mural did change something. It became a gathering place. People would stop on their way home from soul-crushing jobs, from lives that felt increasingly mechanical and controlled. They'd pause, read the names, touch the painted faces with fingertips that might be chrome or flesh or some combination that made the distinction increasingly meaningless. They'd remember that resistance was possible. They'd remember that they were human, not resources to be optimized. They'd remember that somewhere, someday, things could be different. And in those moments of remembering, the 47 weren't gone. They were there, present in the memory, in the resistance, in the absolute refusal to surrender humanity to corporate convenience. Daniel Torres had died in a white room, consciousness fragmenting as his neural interface failed. But he'd fought back, saved fragments of himself and others, used those fragments to wake the network, to remind enslaved minds that they'd once been individual people with names and histories worth preserving. That choice, that one desperate act of defiance against overwhelming systemic power, had sparked something corporations couldn't control, couldn't integrate, couldn't shut down, no matter how much security they deployed or how many protests they suppressed. Hope. The belief that we're more than what they tell us we are. The conviction that we deserve better than what they're willing to give. The determination to fight, even when fighting seems impossible, even when the cost is everything. Especially then, because that's when fighting matters most. Years later, in underground bars and netrunner dens and quiet conversations between people who'd learned not to trust corporate surveillance, they still told the story. Details shifted with each retelling, became legend more than history, but the core remained. Once, 47 people fought back against the machinery, trying to erase them. Once, a scientist chose mercy over career. Once, resistance succeeded, even though success looked like death. And every time someone signed a corporate contract without reading the fine print, someone else would mention Daniel Torres, would say, "Remember what happened to him. Remember what they'll do if we let them. Remember that we have to fight, have to resist, have to maintain our humanity even when they make it easier not to." The story became a warning, a promise, a reminder that the war for human dignity never ends, that corporations will always push boundaries, that the price of remaining human is eternal vigilance. But it was also proof that resistance is possible, that even in Night City's neon-soaked dystopia, even in a world where megacorporations own governments and human life is just another commodity, The individual spirit can endure, can fight,